So it's a real testimony, I think, to the chemistry in the room and the way the day was structured, that we may, Peter, have more people here at 3:30 in the afternoon than we started with today. Usually I hate being the last speaker because you know after lunch and the famous doctor talk that you're going to lose 30% of your crowd. So I do not think this is about me and hoping I can hold your attention. I think it's about, I'll use the chemistry word again, of the mechanisms of what has taken place today. And I'll be sharing with you a few thoughts as we prepare to get started on tomorrow's week. I heard a lot of talk that made me think of the word apathy in the question and answer panel just now. We know a lot about depression. We know a lot about anxiety. Apathy, I think, must affect 90% of folks who are 2 quarts low on dopamine. It is that feeling of, if you're in a couple situation or if you're the caregiver, where you're the dragger and they're the draggee. And once they get there, they may have a fine time, but the dread factor kicks in and it just doesn't seem worth the trouble. It doesn't seem worth the bother. They're self-conscious about will they be able to interact effectively with other people. And it's just easier to sit at home in front of the tube, you know. So I applaud a lot of those questions and the dialogue that was going on there about how to approach that. Another key factor that I heard over and over in your sharing together is one of the most difficult challenges for family caregivers is that the person they are assisting's perception of how he's doing has not yet, and what he can do, has not yet caught up with his actual frailty and limitations. It's very overwhelming. Jan, I got so many pearls from you this morning. One of them was the we-ness factor. I asked a patient last week in clinic, how long have you had Parkinson's? And his wife interjected, we've had it 11 years. And I thought, really, both of you, how curious. And then the whole concept of what do we call these people who take care? Her bookmark, if you didn't pick it up out on the table, said, if I am the caregiver, are you the caretaker? Caretaker, we used to usually use that phrase many years ago. It sounds like someone who works at Forest Lawn, you know. I prefer care partner, as do many of you, but almost all the literature is still directed to the concept of caregiving. But then you ask, well, who's the care recipient? And that begins to sound like a diagnostic category, you know, so it's a challenge. So I want to talk about, for a few minutes, moving forward, what are you going to take from today? What might you do with it? Hopefully you felt some of that perceptible change that I said this morning. If you would plug in, that might be possible. So take a minute now, just take a breath. I can't do this Caitlin style, but take a breath. Let it out. Check in with yourself. What has today been for you? I tell you, I couldn't work any better with Susan Hedlund if we had this choreographed on the resilience factor. So I'm going to circle back to her comments on that. And then moving forward from strengths. Did some of you do the inventory, the assessment that's on page like 9, 10, and 11 in your booklet? If you didn't, take a little time later in the day and do that. It's not a graded test. You're not going to turn it in to us with the National Parkinson Foundation. But the only challenge I found with that is it's a little bit from a posture of empty tanks. Are you 2 quarts low? Again, I'll use that analogy in a particular area of your personal, spiritual, physical health, all of those kinds of things. And how might you shore those areas up? So in my closing remarks, I'm going to focus on the other end of the spectrum of moving out of your strengths to do what you need to and choose to do. So I want you to put your thinking cap on and kind of, as we're here the next 20 minutes or so together, be thinking about what your strengths are to deal with issues in front of you. Resilience is the ability to return to an original shape after being pulled, stretched, or pressed. Have you ever felt those things? Of course. The capacity to adapt to stress, trauma, or loss healthfully. Synonyms: flexible, elastic, able to ride the ups and downs of life with increasing capacity to make wiser, healthier choices for ourselves. Resilience is not about bouncing back. This is what my image was when we first had the chairs, you know, the electric chairs, lift chairs. Not about bouncing back. Myths about it. Resilience is a trait. People either have it or they don't. That's not true. Resilience is like wisdom. It can be learned. Resilient people are independent, tough-minded, and self-reliant. No, those people are Swedes. We learned that this morning, right? Resilient families don't have problems. If you know families, if you know a single family that is not ridden with a few problems, I'll stay afterwards and I want you to tell me their address and phone number so I can get some help. Resilient people are immune to stress and negative emotions. Of course not. And here's my unfavorite. Adversity makes people stronger. How many of you have heard people say, what doesn't kill you make you stronger? Don't you just want to kill those people? Another bit of bad theology is people who will say, God will not give you more than you can handle. I don't think God does either, but if you think life might not, from time to time, be overwhelming, you've got to be under the age of 50. That's really all I've got to say about that. And really lucky so far. So the characteristics of resilient folks, these folks, the ones who are able to just keep on in a healthy way on the road no matter how long, they're optimistic. They do not believe that difficulty is personal, permanent, nor pervasive to their life. To some extent, resilient folks feel in control of their own life. They can handle uncomfortable feelings and uncertain outcomes. They are willing to ask for help. Did we not hear a bunch of stuff about that today? Able to persevere. They have close, dependable relationships. I've been on the road a good bit the past 10 years, and one of the things I've learned is that I have very few friends. I am trying to maintain enough sociable, willing spirit contacts that I can make friends when I decide to make that a priority. But you can't have those relationships without cultivating them. Time. And you don't ask people for favors that you don't know. So it's very important to build that circle beyond just you and your care partner. They have learned to savor the moment. They find humor and beauty and creativity and joy in some of their strangest places. Many people who are resilient find meaning in what happens around them and to them. And they lead from signature strengths. So again, not everything is perfect with those people. Here she's saying, I can't say I'm entirely pleased with my hip replacement. Strengths are where our greatest potential for growth lies. Understanding what they are and which you hold are the first step toward realizing the greatness within you. They can be defined, and this is a little technical here, so stay with me at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a pre-existing capacity for a particular way of behaving, thinking, or feeling that is authentic, it is energizing, and enables optimal function and a sense of well-being. That is a core strength. So I just plopped some up here because I had this as an 11th hour vision about 3 days ago, and Vaughn says, boy, I wish you'd have had that vision last week when we were shipping materials for the meeting. So we will have that for you as part of the website package, but just take a look at those for a minute and kind of eyeball to see, write down a word or two about a character trait that you know for you is a good, solid, strong suit. I think for me, flexibility is one. Humor is one. I find almost everything funny. I really have to monitor that on my clinical days. I like to think intelligence, although, at 4 in the afternoon, it's so hard to prove. But sort of pick some for yourself. And then I'm going to show you a sample profile. This happens to be my husband Frank's. 3 years with Parkinson's disease, diagnosed in his early 80s. My husband is a very calm person. He is a retired accounting professor. his midlife crisis was to quit sleeping in a tie. He's an easygoing kind of guy. Fairness is one of his strengths. He wants the world to be a fair and righteous and decent place. If we were going to buy bicycles for the kids, he wanted them to be the same size, cost the same amount of money. It was really neurotic, but highly fair. Integrity. We talked about integrity this morning. Integrity to the outside and emotional integrity. He's the outward integrity guy, just the peak of integrity. I'll come back to this in a minute. So the strengths we use to communicate with each other are very important. I love the idea, the other Susan had this morning, of sitting, and you talk 5 minutes, and I don't interrupt. And I talk 5 minutes, except at my house we'd be done in 2 minutes. All the sparkling conversation would be over. But just say you took that 5 minutes because the other person maybe thinks and processes a little slower. We're just hearing that with each other. That's a wonderful tool. Just magnificent. You need to be sitting face to face and you need to turn off the television. And evidently pry the mouse out of his hand for the computer screen. So from the time we're first meeting someone wonderful in our lives to that link that we become a couple, communication is difficult. Men and women tend to think differently. This is my slide from this morning. We use different words. We use a different rate of speech. I've told this to some of the MPF people audiences in the past, but one of my favorite anecdotes about my husband is one morning he was reading when we actually got the paper copy of the Wall Street Journal. We were at the kitchen table, and he was reading. He said, listen to this. It says that women use twice as many words as men to say the same thing. I wanted to let him have that one, but I couldn't. That's because we have to tell you everything twice. So, and you know that does not get better just because we've been together longer and in the presence of a chronic disease with a communication snafu here and there, does it? No. So sometimes you have to temper your strengths. If I'm organized and I go way to the stray end of the farm with that, I might become really compulsive, right? If I like to persevere, I work with somebody like this. We don't call her a person who perseveres. We say she's relentless, So you can carry a strength too far, but when it is tempered and you have the practice in how to do that, leading with your strengths can get you tons farther down the road than building up your weaknesses. So if you're riding the waves of life, an event might occur, your sensations or emotions build around it. The tendency is to jump off the wave, act out, opt out, back out, just not deal with that person or that situation. But you could hang in, allow yourself your feelings, write it out, hopefully get some new awareness into yourself, the other person, and the experience. And then a new awareness might bring the ability to respond thoughtfully, I don't mean politely, I mean intentionally, rather than just react, shooting from the hip. So it's all about balance. All about balance. Positive emotions are the fuel for resilience. Positive emotions can help people find meaning in ordinary and difficult events, which kind of can create an upward spiral of greater well-being. Change can provide, you can look at change, whether it's forced change or elective change, as an opportunity for a fresh start instead of having to start all over. Do you hear the difference? Not just in my voice, but the reality of the words we choose shapes the feelings that emerge around that. Life presents multiple opportunities for renewal. I hope you have reached out and felt or grabbed one of those opportunities in the course of our time together today. If you think about it, there are really no limitations on the number of times you're allowed to reinvent yourself. You get an opportunity for that fresh start every morning when you get out of bed. So the strategic steps are to nurture a positive view of yourself and your loved one, Affirmations are a good way to do that. My husband puts sticky notes on the bathroom mirror. I never know what I'm going to find. Except his neurologist told him, because his voice is very soft, that every time he goes to the bathroom, he has to count in a loud voice from 1 to 10, and that's on my bathroom mirror. I always know exactly how many times a day he has to pee, because I hear him go, 1, 2. Yeah. So practice problem solving and communication skills. Feed and water your relationships with close family and friends. Learn healthy coping strategies versus self-destructive patterns. Reach out to help somebody else. That sounds kind of Pollyanna-ish, but I have a person who takes care of her husband with Parkinson's, and every Wednesday she volunteers at a homeless shelter. And I said to her, Karen, that is just what you need, one more do-gooder thing. But it takes her out of her regular do-good thing, and it is a lovely distraction that she still feels like is making a contribution in the real world. Keep a daily highlight or gratitude journal. That's not another to-do chore. If you have an awareness that by 8 o'clock in the evening, you're going to say to yourself or write down the best thing that happened that day, even if it's a one-word deal, it makes you start looking for it, where you're constantly waiting for the good piece. And then the last thing is to maintain your sense of humor. Some of you know that I love Irma Bombeck. Does everybody know who Bombeck was? She's a humorist, a columnist, and she was in Arizona when I practiced out at Barrow for a few years, and she did a workshop for speakers who wanted to incorporate humor into their presentations. And she said, it's not about being funny. You have no goal to be a comedian. Your goal is recognizing what's funny. So if sense of humor is that recognition, how many of you think that you identify what's funny in your surroundings a lot of the days? That's about half. So for the rest of you, I have a remedial assignment. I want you to go home today or back to your room. If you're sharing a room, wait till the other person is out so you don't frighten anyone. And I want you to keep a watch on, and I want you to take off every stitch of clothing, head to toe. And just look at yourself up and down for 60 seconds from all angles in that mirror. And if you don't see anything funny, then I want you to get with Vaughn at your earliest opportunity, and she and I will work together to try to find a remedial humor recognition course for you. So from your 3 signature strengths, I would invite you to think of the acronym JOLT, just one little thing. One strength that you can use to reframe a situation in a positive light and make a sustainable change in your life. Just one little thing. And you have to start tomorrow morning. You can't wait till you get back home, and you can't wait till the Monday after New Year's Day, and you can't, one little thing, and then decide who you will partner with for compliance or checking in with to see how your physical or emotional health improved in the next 21 days. So I have references here that will be in the materials we send out. If you're going to do these things, resilience and sustainable change requires us to be flexible. It requires us to be willing to try new things. And it requires that you never, ever give up hope. I will close with Emily Dickinson's stanza to her poem. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Thank you.